Hello, and welcome to the Maple Tapes, a new podcast by the High Commission of Canada in the United Kingdom, in which our British listeners get to eavesdrop on my exclusive fireside chats with truly exceptional Canadians. I'm your host, Janice Charette, Canada's High Commissioner in the UK. Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's inaugural episode, we're going to be talking to Karen Kain, Artistic Director of the National Ballet of Canada and a former prima ballerina, as she reflects on her absolutely incredible 50-year career, including her experiences as a trailblazing woman leader in the world of ballet and arts and culture more generally. We're going to ask her about her views on the value and the potential of what we in the world of international relations like to call cultural diplomacy or soft power. And as well, talk a bit about the topic of the day, the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic on the world of arts and culture. So a very warm welcome to you, Karen. It's an honor to have you on our show with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
If you don't mind, Karen, I'm going to start by introducing you to our listeners so they know a little bit about you. And I think Karen is truly a wonderful place for us to start this series of exceptional Canadians, because Karen Kain is a truly exceptional Canadian. She's known by many as one of the most talented classical dancers of her era. Karen is also one of Canada's foremost and most committed advocates for the arts. Karen trained at Canada's National Ballet School in Toronto and joined the National Ballet of Canada in 1969. After a sensational debut as the Swan Queen in Swan Lake at the tender age of 19, she was promoted to principal dancer. At the prestigious International Ballet Competition in Moscow in 1971, Karen was awarded the silver medal in the women's category and shared a special prize for the best pas de deux with her frequent partner, Frank Augustin. She then embarked upon an absolutely remarkable international career, performing many of ballet's greatest roles with illustrious ballet companies such as the Paris Opera Ballet, Roland Petit's Le Ballet de Marseille, the Bolshoi Ballet, London Festival Ballet, and the Vienna State Opera Ballet. Following a farewell tour like a rock star back in 1997, Karen retired from dancing and took up the position of artist in residence with the National Ballet of Canada, a role that was later expanded to that of artist associate. In 2005, she was appointed artist director of the National Ballet of Canada. From 2004 to 2008, Karen also served as chair of the Canada Council for the Arts and was awarded the Barbara Hamilton Memorial Award in 2007 for excellence and professionalism in the performing arts. Now, that is just one of many Canadian and international awards that Karen has received throughout her career. And really, I think, Karen, this testifies to your incredible accomplishments, both as a performer and as an advocate for the arts. But the list goes on and on. A companion of the Order of Canada, a member of the Order of Ontario, the first Canadian recipient of the Cartier Lifetime Achievement Award, an officer of the Order of Arts and Letters, a recognition bestowed by the Government of France. In 1997, I was very pleased actually to be at the National Arts Centre when Karen was honored with the Governor General's National Arts Centre Award and was inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame the following year. A Governor General's Award for Lifetime Artistic Achievement followed in 2002. In 2012, she was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. And in 2019, Karen became the first Canadian ever to receive the prestigious Queen Elizabeth II Coronation Award, the highest honor given by the Royal Academy of Dance. And a fine tribute to you with the Karen Kain School of the Arts, which officially opened in 2008, which is a testimony to your ongoing contribution and commitment to cultural life in Canada. And now we get to where we are today. The 2019-2020 season was to mark your 50th anniversary with the National Ballet. And in January 2021, but you're going to tell me whether this is still true or not, you're going to retire as artistic director and be named Artistic Director Emeritus. In the words of the National Ballet of Canada, Karen Kain, you are an artist, a leader, and truly an icon. It's my great pleasure to talk to you today. I can't wait to hear some of your stories from those 50 years in ballet and to just hear from you about the arts in Canada and around the world.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. I'd forgotten a lot of those things.
Well, I have to say, when I was looking at the introduction, I said to my team, wow, this is an impressive list of awards. So let's go back to the beginning then, if that's okay. It's probably a pretty good place to start. What got you into ballet in the first place? You know, you left your family at such a young age, and you were thrown into an environment which I can only imagine was very competitive and extraordinarily demanding. I understand that you may have had some inspiration in your own family, though. Your great-great-grandmother, Frances Stewart, I understand, came to Canada from Ireland with 3 small children. So maybe that independent streak, that ability to be a pioneer and an explorer in your own right, is in your DNA. So where do you think all of that drive came from?
Well, I have to credit my mom because she grew up on a farm in Marquette, Manitoba. And she felt that she had not had any exposure to the arts or culture, and she wanted to make sure that her children did. So she decided to put me into ballet lessons. We were living in Ancaster, Ontario, and she found a teacher who was giving ballet lessons out of her house that was within walking distance of our house. And she took me there, and I would go once a week. And this lady, I don't remember her name now, she had me in her basement with a couch, a kitty litter box, and one record, the Tennessee Waltz with Patti Page. And she would...
The beautiful Tennessee.
The beautiful Tennessee Waltz. And she would put me through my paces, which was basically sort of creative dancing. Just, you know, she wasn't really a ballet teacher, but I loved it. And my parents saw that I was really engaged with it, and that I seemed to have some talent, and that I was musical. And so they researched, and I took lessons from a better teacher at the Old Town Hall in Ancaster. And her name was Betty Carey, I believe. And she, after a year of giving me lessons, she told my parents that she felt that I was very talented, that I appeared to go into a trance when I was dancing. I think I just loved it so much. I could use my imagination. I loved music. But she recommended, and I'm, forever grateful to her, she recommended my parents take me to audition for Canada's National Ballet School, which we had never heard of. So, and I was 10 years old at the time, so my mother contacted the ballet school and got an audition for me, and my parents drove me into the big city, Toronto. And we were living, as I said, in Mississauga, so we didn't go into Toronto very often. And I auditioned for Betty Oliphant, and I remember, what they look at is proportions and flexibility. They look at you as just a piece of malleable material when you audition for a ballet school, like this one, a very prestigious one who only takes the most talented children they can find from across the country and across the world, actually. She made me do, Betty Oliphant, she made me do this little exercise where I had to leave the big studio, and my parents and Betty were at the front of the big studio, and I had to re-enter, and I had to pretend that I was a princess greeting all of the people who were lined up to see me. She wanted to see if I had any imagination, which I think is quite incredible. I don't think that most major ballet schools in the world look for imagination. They look for your body type, they look for your physicality. Yeah, to see if you actually have the physical goods to withstand this very intense training and not get injured. But she was looking to see if I had an imagination, which when I look back now, I think one of the reasons I think that I had the career I had was not because I was so physically gifted. I had many things I was lacking physically. I wasn't extremely supple. I was very strong. I was very determined. I was very musical. But I didn't have all the physical requirements of, that could... So I struggled with that. But my career, my imagination helped me have, a much more major career, because I love to create characters. I love to become other people, and I loved music. So those kinds of things, that kind of imagination and that kind of willingness to go to places that some dancers who are very physically gifted aren't able to do. I think that sort of gave me a different kind of career and a very successful career. And when I look back now, how one does at a certain point in one's age, I realize how incredibly fortunate I was that the right people at the right time guided me to the right places so that I could fulfill the talent I had. And that my parents were so supportive. And as I say, it wasn't inexpensive to allow me to have the training that I needed. And I lived in residence there because it was too much of a commute to do, which was hard because I missed my family terribly. They were only in Mississauga, but I could only see them at certain times, And my parents made a kind of sacrifice. My siblings made a kind of sacrifice. Not that my parents didn't try to provide everything for them in the areas that they were interested in, but there was only so much money to go around, and the ballet school was expensive, even with a scholarship. So, I owe so much to my family. Things just unfolded for me in a way that I now see as how extraordinarily lucky I was with the people who took my hand and gave me chances. And that continued through my career. But I had this window of opportunity where there was nobody else, and I got to get to the head of the line. So again, serendipity, good luck, all those things came into play and have always come into play in my career.
But there's a lot of humility in that, Karen, too, because I suspect a lot of hard work was done by you along the way. And, being away from your family and that kind of devotion from such a young age, that's a big sacrifice that you made as well. But I want to just talk about that transition. When I think about that, being from, the basement teacher with the kitty litter box and the Tennessee Waltz album to joining the National Ballet, being under the professional gaze of amazing artists like, Rudolf Nureyev, one of the greatest names and the biggest personalities in ballet. And you were the darling of the scene yourself. You were photographed by Andy Warhol. You were in the midst of the glamour and the decadence of the New York art scene in the 1970s. So it's a long journey from that basement. What was it like? What did it feel like?
Well, I never lost sight of how amazing it was. I was always pinching myself, When Rudolf Nureyev came into our midst in the early 70s, and he chose me right away to dance with him in Sleeping Beauty, and I had some of the solo parts, and I also had the main role, Princess Aurora. And we were so fortunate again. The National Ballet of Canada got to tour all over the U.S. with this brand new spectacular production of The Sleeping Beauty, which, by the way, we had hoped to bring to London this summer. So Rudolf Nureyev came and we did this beautiful, beautiful production, which is still just gorgeous. And he chose me, and he gave me again all over the U.S. and in New York City, where we would play for 3 weeks with Rudolph and fill the Metropolitan Opera House. And we would do mixed programs and Sleeping Beauty and Swan Lake. And, I was, again, this was a big dance era. And to be able to fill the Metropolitan Opera House, I think it has like 4,000 seats. I don't know. I may be exaggerating a little, but it's massive.
Big house.
Big house. Rudolf Nureyev in his prime with us in all of this. And he took me under his wing. And not only did we dance together frequently with the National Ballet of Canada, but he would take me guesting with him. So I danced in Rome with him, Sleeping Beauty. I mean, he mentored me. He mentored me. He gave me advice. Everyone thinks of him as kind of this arrogant Russian, but he was so dedicated to the profession. And when he realized that artists that he was working with were equally dedicated and open to working the way he worked, he would give everything to them. And I'm not just talking about me. There were other artists in the National Ballet of Canada. He did the same thing. Frank Augustine, Veronica Tennant. And when I know his years at the Paris Opera Ballet, he nurtured a whole generation of spectacular dancers who were eager and open and willing to go to wherever he wanted them to go in terms of their physicality. And so there was an enormous generosity to young, talented, open-minded dancers internationally by Rudolf Nureyev. He was an incredibly generous human being. And if
Did he have a soft spot for Canadians in particular, or was that just a coincidence that those three names kind of came off here? Came from?
Yeah, he was very, very fond of the National Ballet of Canada, and we, in those years, spent a lot of time with him and gave him opportunities too. He did not only the big ballets like Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty and Giselle, but he did mixed programs with us, and it was helpful to us too because it helped us have an international presence, and people knew we existed because, quite frankly, before that, despite how good we were and despite how hard Celia Franca had worked to create this wonderful company, we weren't very well known internationally. And Rudolph really changed that for us. And he was well loved in the National Ballet of Canada by the generation of dancers that worked with him.
You've talked about the hard work that Nureyev was looking for the people he wanted the dancers that he wanted to work with and mentor. There's something really fascinating about, on the one hand, this ideal notion that people have of the prima ballerina, this ethereal, beautiful, lithe individual who is, who's able to perform these incredible acts of grace. At the same time, to be a prima ballerina requires a raw physicality, a strength of both character, but also a physical strength and an emotional resilience to be able to do that night after night and to be able to go through the ups and downs of being a performing artist. Did you know that you had that within you? Like, how did you develop that? How did you grow that capacity?
Well, I think I always had it in me. I was always incredibly determined and hardworking physically. I enjoyed hard work, hard physical work. But there were times when I lost my mojo. There were times when, for whatever reasons, possibly even just my nature, I would get despondent and depressed. And so I struggled with that off and on, and I got help, thank God there's help. And I realized that I have to pay more attention to my mental health as well as my physical health. And sometimes it would be something like being on this incredible high with Rudolph and doing these amazing things, and then he wasn't with us anymore. And then I would feel, I would find it, yes, I would feel flat, and I would have to re-find my own personal motivation to drive myself. Because when I was with him, he sort of drove us all. He was such an inspiration of every day, put in the work, do the training. You never take for granted that your body is going to respond the way you want it to respond unless you train it every single day to be, to physically respond the way you want it to. And I would get despondent and get a little out of shape and not work as hard and feel uninspired. And yes, I definitely went through those. And then, John Neumeyer would come in and create a ballet. And I adore John Neumeyer. And we still have a wonderful friendship to today. And he would create things, or we would do one of his ballets that he'd already created. And he was so inspiring to work with, because he didn't just deal with the physical side of everything the way Rudolph did. It's very much more emotionally motivated. John's movement and John's idea of creation is usually about human beings and what they're feeling and thinking, and that results in some kind of physicality, but it isn't, the physicality isn't sort of the be-all and the end-all the way it is in perhaps Sleeping Beauty, although there's a lot more to that too. But John opened up all sorts of new ways for me to think about using my emotional qualities and my temperamental qualities in ways that I hadn't really, I guess I'd used them naturally in response to music, but I hadn't really created characters that way or thought about the intentions of the character in a way that John made me. But he worked with humans, like the stories were human beings. They weren't creatures or fairy tales. They were real human beings. And so for me, this again was a huge eye-opening experience and voyage with him that gave me a whole new way to approach my work and to think about it. And it was extremely helpful. It helped me mature in a way and find other qualities that I could bring to my work that weren't just the hugely physical qualities.
You danced, though, for a superhuman period of time. I mean, you danced much longer than the average career span of a prima ballerina. I'm told you danced 28 years in total. That's almost twice as long as the traditional career that a female prima ballerina can expect to have. I mean, what kept you going? How were you able to do this? I appreciate this is about motivation and being able to get, the emotional response as well as the physical response. But how did you keep going? What do you attribute this to?
Well, to be clear, I was no longer dancing Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and those kinds of ballets in those final years. Mostly, I had the good fortune to be part of creations that were created for a woman of a certain age. I mean, Glenn Tetley created a character in Alice that I was the older Alice, looking back at the younger Alice, which made for a very interesting perspective and gave me a role for a mature dancer. But there were many instances of that. John Neumeyer also created things for me where he wanted the maturity, and yes, I only danced the repertoire that I thought suited me at that point in my career. I wasn't trying to compete with the enormous physicality and beautiful physicality of the younger dancers, and I also knew it was their time. But it was my time to be an artist of a different sort that was more appropriate.
You also created opportunities then, by extending the range of female ballet dancers to include some of those new roles and include some of those new approaches. So, that's another example, I guess, of your trailblazer career. I want to talk about the shift then, from being the dancer to the artistic director. You are now the Celia Franca. You are now the individual looking around, picking the Karen Kain to dance opposite the male lead in the Sleeping Beauty or whatever the particular performance. What was that transition like, going from being one of the company to the artistic director, to becoming the leader of your former peers, and working with creative collaborators in a different way? How did you prepare yourself for that? And did you think of yourself as a leader in a different way?
Well, I can't remember exactly when it was, but James Kadelka, who is a renowned Canadian choreographer and had been my colleague at the company for a long time, when he became the artistic director of the National Ballet of Canada, he invited me to come in. I don't remember my title, but it might have been artistic associate or something like that, to work with him and to help him. Now, I was hoping it would be more artistic. It ended up being more fundraising, which, didn't make me really happy at the time, even though I have close relationships with a lot of our major donors and really enjoy them and love them and are grateful to them. I wanted to be doing something more artistic, but he absolutely did not allow me to do that. And I wasn't allowed to coach. I wasn't allowed to do anything, so except fundraise. And but you know what? It was good for me in a way. I learned a lot more about how the National Ballet works behind the scenes, and grew closer to a lot of our donors and people that have supported me throughout my career. But James he quit the company after 2 years. And meanwhile, I had all this kind of internal training that I didn't even know I was getting, because I still sat in on the senior management meetings. I still understood the bigger picture. And so in many ways, I'm grateful to James, because he prepared me. And he was kind of mad at me at one point, said, "Don't you see what I'm trying to do for you?" I didn't. I just wanted to be in the studio with the dancers and all of that, and I never was. And he actually had a plan for me.
So you had to transition very quickly then, from a role where you thought you were going to be, you would be actually with the dancers out there coaching, to being in the boardroom, to being a leader. With James's departure, you said in 2 years you were running the show. Sometimes people who go through that kind of a rapid transition, they can start to question themselves and wonder, like, oh, somebody's going to show up someday and come through the door and kind of go, "What do you think you're doing here?" The famous imposter syndrome. Did you ever suffer that? Did you go through that at all? Or did you have the inner confidence from being a dancer that you were able to somehow transition to being in that business leadership role as well?
I never thought that I had any kind of business expertise, but I didn't pretend to, but I knew I was surrounded by experts. And our board and our honorary board and everyone who believes in the National Ballet of Canada and supports it, I trust them. And my trust has been well placed. I have never had any reason. So I could concentrate on developing repertoire and bringing in things and fundraising for the repertoire that I wanted to show the public, as opposed to fundraising for what someone else wanted to show the public. So for me, it's been a gift and a joy to be artistic director. I've loved it. I've loved every minute of it. Except for now, it's a little tougher now.
You probably still believe in your product profoundly, and you're still doing what you love.
Exactly. I still am. And now my planning has been reduced significantly to much smaller projects. And that was a little hard for me at first. And now I'm on board with it. This is what we need to do now for the future of the National Ballet of Canada. And we're going to go virtual. We've never really invested in the virtual platform hugely. We used it for our donors and our patrons, but we didn't really, I admire the Royal Ballet so much, and Kevin O'Hare is a lovely friend, a lovely man and a lovely friend, and I see what they can do, how they can broadcast their amazing performances, beautifully lit and with orchestra and everything. Well, we never had the capacity. We don't own our theater. We rent our theater, the beautiful Four Seasons Centre for the Arts in Toronto. I love this theater, but we are just renters. We've never built the capacity to film for national distribution or any of that. And we're really looking much more seriously at our digital capacity now. It's something we're really focusing on. Just right now, all we're doing is just keeping in touch with our patrons and our donors and our supporters by creating content. It's given me the opportunity to bring in a number of BIPOC artists, choreographers to work with us, and I have 3 young choreographers in residence that they're all creating work. So it's becoming a very creative time, but it's so limited, how many people you can use and who's married to who, or who's living with who, and then you put them in their pods and you can't, So our work as a administration has become much more complex in figuring out how to create this new work with so many impositions on it about who can be with who, and so that part is frustrating. It's a lot of hard work and it's frustrating. I mean, we had just opened. I don't know if you managed to see Robert Benet, one of our young associate choreographers in the company. He had created a piece that we did in London at a huge. I think it was the old building that had been for newspapers, where the newspapers had been.
Yes, the old press building or something, I think.
Yes, and we did this this performance with. It was already the dancers were separated on different panels of linoleum, and you could walk through them and around them, and it was a really wonderful experience. And we did it at the AGO in Toronto in a huge room, and it was very successful. And so we thought, well, if there's one thing we can do, maybe a socially distanced in a huge room with very few public kind of coming through at a time. And we just got it open at Harbourfront Centre last week. We managed to do 2 shows and we got closed down. So it was very disappointing, but we'll do it again when things get a little better here and we're allowed to.
Karen, describing a situation in Toronto, which I think a lot of us here in the United Kingdom can identify with, which is, you start out and you launch a venture which you've invested time and your heart into, and then the COVID restrictions have changed, and unfortunately the venue has had to shut down let's hope temporarily, and you'll be able to come back. Let me go back to something else you said, Karen. You talked about the opportunity to diversify, I guess, some of the people you work with. And you mentioned BIPOC. And so for our UK listeners, I think I have this right, Black, Indigenous, and People of Color is what that acronym refers to. So, diversifying your dancers, diversifying your choreographers. Why is that important to you as a leader within the National Ballet?
Well, I've been through a lot of thinking about all of this as this kind of erupted in our world, and I've always been extremely proud of how the National Ballet of Canada, you haven't seen it very recently, but it's extremely diverse. I mean, the dancers are from all over the world. There's every skin color you could imagine. And I thought, we are, this is very Canadian. I'm very proud of it. And we don't, it's wonderful. The National Ballet of Canada is one of the most diverse companies I've seen anywhere. However, when this all happened and there was, we sat down with our dancers. Well, we Zoomed with our dancers, and we started conversations about this, and all sorts of things came to light that I had never realized. For instance, my beautiful ladies of color who have to wear pink tights and shoes. And even in contemporary works, they get to wear their bare legs often, and then they have to paint their pink shoes to try and match their skin. Because it's not a good line to have a beautiful brown leg with a pink shoe on the bottom. And it's a lot of work for them, and to find the right tone of makeup to put on their shoes and their ribbons to make the line beautiful. And they've always done it, and I've always thought it looked great. However, for them, wearing pink tights and trying to whiten their skin for Swan Lake and things like that was always something that made them feel not good about themselves. Mm-hmm. And, in my mind, in my age, I think, oh, well, we always love to put the white makeup on and look so, ghostly and ethereal and like swans and all that. And they feel it's not right for them. They don't feel good.
Authentic,
it's not authentic. And I heard that, but they'd never said it before. I guess nobody was brave enough to say it before. But now they spoke to me and they said, "We don't feel right. We don't feel good. We don't feel equal to other dancers in the company because we have to do this." And so I immediately went to the woman who's responsible for ordering our point shoes and all of that and said, "Are there shoes available in different shades of dark skin?" And she said, "Yes, now they are." So I said, "Order them for all our dancers who need them now." This was that was last March. And they've been coming in, these shoes. And one of the young women tried hers on for the first time last week. And the joy, she was screaming with joy, she was crying. It became like a viral thing on her because we videotaped her first try on of her new shoes. It was such a joyful moment. But I never thought of that because I hadn't put myself in their experience. In their shoes, literally. So there's a lot of things that I'm learning. And it's making me rethink, eventually I'm going to do this new Swan Lake. And it's making me rethink. I'm not going to force those young women to paint themselves white. And we have to take these things now. This is a new world. It's Canada. We have to be more inclusive in ways that I hadn't thought about. So it's been eye-opening for me. I'm sure there's a lot of other things I'm going to learn about this, but that was a crucial one. And I'm so glad they were brave enough to tell me that, and I wish they had sooner. So, just things like that have changed. The way we're thinking, the way we're approaching things has to change. And, on a bigger scale, there are many, many things we have to rethink about how we treat people. I mean, police brutality, all of those things, which is just sickening. But I think if Canada is going to be the best Canada it can be, we have to rethink a lot of things about how we treat people. Even though we're, as I say, one of the most diverse cities in the world, we still got to get more things right about this.
What an amazing insight, though, in terms of a great example, frankly, of what we're all learning about what does systemic racism mean. It's not because anybody set out to do this, but think about the power that respect had for that individual dancer. And who knows what that person will go on to do in their career as a result of this. It's a remarkable, I think, remarkable insight, actually. But it's also a great example and testimony to your leadership that you were able to hear that and allow that to happen, not, I think, to be emulated, I would say. Let me take you back, though, to, okay, so you brought the National Ballet here to the United Kingdom early on in my tenure as High Commissioner. And as you said, you were planning to bring it back again. How do you think taking the ballet internationally or being able to share Canada's creative arts, literature, cinema, ballet, the spoken word, whatever it is, why is that important? Do you believe in this idea of a country's ability to influence others through sharing culture, culture as a tool of soft power? Does that resonate with you?
It does. It does, absolutely. But I have another sort of very personal beef in that we gained a lot of notoriety through working with Rudolf Nureyev and going to the Met in New York every summer, and everyone went, oh, who knew there was a really good ballet company in Toronto? I have been infuriated by this fact that the rest of the world didn't really know about the National Ballet of Canada. And when I was working in Europe, with Roland Petit and dancing in Paris and dancing all over, and I would say it's from the National Ballet of Canada, and people would look at me like, which is, I'll go a little off topic. When we brought John Neumeyer's Nijinsky to the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées a few years ago, it was an incredible success. And this was another place where I had danced at the Paris Opera because of Roland Petit, and nobody had ever heard of the National Ballet of Canada. It did blah, blah, blah. So I always had this little annoyance that there is a major company of great value in Toronto, and nobody in Europe knew about it. They just knew that I was lovely and that I came from somewhere in Canada, but so it's always been a bugbear with me. So when we danced in Paris for a week at the Champs-Élysées and it was sold out and people were screaming and yelling and stamping their feet, we've never had a response like that. And then we won this award for the best dance performance in Paris that year. Over all the major companies of Europe that had visited Paris, we won this award. For me, that was so thrilling because I've always felt that people treated the National Ballet of Canada like we were from some backwater, whatever you call it. And it was one of my main goals as artistic director was to put us back on the international map. I don't know if we were ever on the international map, but to get us on the international map as one of those companies. It's a company to be reckoned with. It's not a little local, how lovely, company. It's a major company. This award in Paris sort of made me feel like we had achieved that, because the French are really, and these critics have seen everything, and they're not young, and they're kind of grumpy, and they were wowed by the company. And, and I'm like, yes, finally everybody's seeing what I'm seeing with the National Ballet of Canada. It's a great company. Yes.
Let's talk a bit then about the current situation. And I think that there's a lot of people, myself included, who are really worried about what COVID and this protracted situation of both the social restrictions and the economic circumstances are doing to the world of arts and culture. Really, the sustainability of companies, the ability of artists to actually be able to make a living and, keep on going. And our ability to continue to be able to share our stories and talk to each other about the experiences that we're having. In some ways, this would be the moment for us to actually have ability to do that, because what we're going through individually and collectively is just so unprecedented. You talked earlier about some of the kind of ability to, let's see how we explore digital platforms and so on. That's what we need to do. And how excited dancers are or performers are when they actually get to perform and to be able to do what they love so much. But what is happening in the sector? What is the sustainability? Are you worried or are you optimistic?
I remain optimistic, but certainly we've had to downsize considerably. There's a number of people who have been laid off or furloughed. We remain focused on the artists and keeping them employed and keeping them artistically fulfilled. It's a lot more organizationally difficult to keep people safe and let them work. We're trying to keep them motivated by them knowing that they're going to be filmed for our digital content. But of course we can't use all of them and we can't use big groups. I think it's very difficult for them to keep motivated. But if they know this is why when I planned this digital season, I tried to include everybody in something. And Robert Benet, the young choreographer, has tried to do multiple casts of Dreamers Ever Leave You so that even the young new ones and some of the apprentices, everybody has something to learn and work on. And just for their morale and to keep them motivated. But inside the National Ballet, it's very, very quiet in the administrative side. They're only the kind of skeleton senior management crew, and of course mostly we're doing meetings by Zoom, our planning, our strategizing, endless Zoom meetings with the executive management, who I must tell you I've come to appreciate so much more. Watching them go through this kind of adversity and this kind of pushing them to the limit of imagination. And, usually we make a plan and we follow through. Now we make a plan, we budget, we do everything, we throw it out. We make another plan. We hear from the government that, no, we won't be able to do that. We make another plan. So it's actually much more work for everyone on the team, on the senior management team. I've grown to admire them even more for their good humor and flexibility and hard work. Everybody's just doing the most they can to keep this company afloat. As I said, we've cut a lot of expenses, but we're also having to fundraise. In Canada, we're only partially supported by the government and the city and the province. It's not enough. It's only like it's a small percentage. It's less than 50% of our. So we have a lot of work to do. We're in constant contact with our patrons and our supporters, and so there seems to be even more work going on, even though we're not performing.
It sounds to me a lot like a big investment in resilience. Do you have a worry about maintaining that? I mean, we don't really know how long this is going to go on for. People who are working from home have, in a lot of cases, we're hearing real concerns about mental health, feelings of isolation. Zoom is no substitute for the fundamentals of human contact that we all crave. Do you have a worry about that?
Well, I do, and I have a great sympathy for it, because certainly in the first few months of this, I only realize now, but I think that I was in a depression myself, and I imagine that many of my colleagues and everything, I know that in our first months of meetings, I really wasn't contributing very much because I was still in a state of shock. Now I'm fully on board with doing my best to bring this company back to to what it should be and needs to be. And I couldn't really walk away from this. I mean, I just, you don't turn your back on an organization that's given you a lifetime of joy and opportunity and everything, and they're in a bad place, and you go, okay, bye-bye. I couldn't do that and live with myself. So I'm here fighting for our future, and I intend to continue to do that and do my best to get the company back to solid ground and performing again, and being the incredibly vital and valuable artistic institution that it is, and giving these young artists the careers they deserve.
What does this mean for your retirement plan, though, Karen? I said in my introduction that we had thought January 2021. I understand that you've postponed your retirement. What is your plan?
I was sort of waiting to see how things were unfolding, but I think, and the trouble is for the National Ballet that the situation of the pandemic has really slowed down their search, their ability to interview candidates nationally and internationally. And so I have pretty much told them that I will stay on until things are in better shape. Yeah. But even as artistic associate, if I move into that title, I'll still be involved with the company. We still have this Swan Lake that's 3/4 built that we are wanting to do, that was supposed to happen last June. And so that is something that is in our future at some point, and I'm very excited about that and very motivated by that. There's a lot of the repertoire that I'm responsible for if we bring Sleeping Beauty back, things like that. So I'm always going to have an association with the National Ballet. I'll always be helping them, fundraising, whatever I can do for them in my new position. So whether I stay as artistic director or move into artistic associate, I don't know. I'm still thinking about it.
I don't know if you started to do the kind of reflection, think back part, but do you have a view about when you think about all that you've accomplished in these roles from the takeover to today, what your legacy is at the National Ballet?
I like to think that the period that I was artistic director was one of the most artistically and financially successful eras of the National Ballet of Canada, and that I've done my best to bolster the artistic content and to keep the organization in a stable position going through whatever we're confronted with, like a pandemic. So I think I feel good about, what I have built for the company, the foundation of the public support and the audiences love the programming. They've come along with all sorts of strange new programming. We honestly, we're in such an incredibly healthy position in every way before this pandemic, and I just want us to get back there.
Karen, you are an inspiration in so many ways, as a dancer, as an artist, as somebody who has become a hard-nosed but big-hearted business person in the world of arts and culture, an advocate for culture. You're also, I think, a incredibly proud Canadian. I've heard you talk about that. What do you think is so special or extraordinary about Canada in your eyes?
Oh, where do I start? Well, just the size and beauty of the country. There isn't anything I don't love about Canada. I'm really proudly Canadian. I brag everywhere I go that I'm from Canada, and I think it's getting even better. I really do. I love how we treat immigrants. I love how we treat the arts, that we support them as much as we can, the government. I love our diversity. I love that every province is so different and has a different approach. And, Winnipeg was where my parents were from, so I spent time as a child, and my mother grew up on a farm. I don't know. There's an acceptance. It's not good enough. There's still many problems in Canada, and as there is racism. There are all those things, but not as much as in other places. I believe we can do better, but I think we do pretty well in Canada. I love it. I love the physical beauty of Canada. I love to walk on the streets and see people from every country wearing their clothes from different traditions and different. I love that you can eat every kind of food you could from anywhere in the world. In Toronto. I don't know. There's goodness in general. There's a lot of goodness in people in Canada because I think they know they live in a really good place.
Well, what a fine place for us to stop then. Let me just say, Karen, this has been an extraordinary opportunity. I really want to thank you for your time, but also for sharing with us just so much of your background and your experience. You've given us a glimpse into the world of the life of a prima ballerina, the world of Canadian, the world and the business of Canadian ballet, your goals and your aspirations to really take us and show us as a real ballet powerhouse on the world stage. You shared with us some of the challenges you got along the way, which I think is also courageous of you. We talked about, cultural diplomacy and ballet and the arts as a way of telling our stories to the world, and really contribute to building the knitting between countries, including the historic cultural ties between Canada and the United Kingdom, which is something that I try to focus on. What came through for me, though, is your humility. And on every occasion, you talked about the people that supported you as a ballerina, the people that helped to mentor you in your career, the people you work with now in the company, the people who you have worked with on the world stage. And as one of the people who sat in the audience and enjoyed those performances, just let me say, this is you've been an extraordinary generous Canadian, giving back to the country. I really want to thank you and say on behalf of all of us here at Canada House in London, just an immense congratulations on a stunning career, 50 years with the National Ballet. We wish you a happy retirement. Something tells me, though, it's not likely to be, knitting and sitting by the fireplace. I suspect there's still more to hear about Karen Kain and her exploits. And let me just say to you, we would love to see you back in London anytime. Once we open our doors here at Canada House again, and we're through this COVID, you're always most welcome. It has been a personal delight to have this time with you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Janice. It's been my pleasure to talk to you.
So that about wraps it up for this first episode of the Maple Tapes. I hope you enjoyed listening to that anywhere near as much as I enjoyed making it. So I hope that you'll stay tuned as well for some future episodes. Thanks again for listening. This is Janice Charette from Canada House in London, signing off for now.